Web design standards are the foundation of usability. They provide the familiarity everyone looks for when using a website. They are the reason you can Google armadillo costumes for sale, land on the first e-commerce website, add it to your cart, and get to the checkout nearly buying it when you realize it doesn't have the features you want, and then go back to Google, find a different website, and quickly add that product to your cart, and get to the cart without having to read the website's car manual equivalent just for you to do so. Web design standards are amazing. They make the internet a more accessible place to find and help you get what you're looking for. However, not everyone likes these so-called web design standards. But what are these web design standards? Why are they important, and why do I even care? What are some examples, and was I really Googling that earlier? In this video, I hope to answer all those questions and more, and try to get to the heart of what makes the web easier to use. To answer the question, what are web standards? They are norms when referring to an aspect of the web or websites that help make the web a more consistent experience for everyone. We can't talk about web standards without first talking about W3C, or the World Wide Web Consortium. The web standards movement started in 1998, which is when I was born actually, to make the web more accessible, secure, and overall streamlined. They mostly covered areas like web accessibility, compatibility, backwards and forwards, privacy, and coding standards. But when you're designing a website, web design standards also exist that indicate how websites should be designed and are likely designed. This is what we're going to focus on in this video, specifically web design standards. And quite frankly, all those other standards are hella boring. Here's how Jacob Nielsen from the NN Group breaks down some definitions when referring to web practices. Standard. 80% of more websites use the same design approach. Users strongly expect standard elements to work a certain way when they visit a new website, because that's how things always work. Convention. 50 to 79% of websites use the same design approach. With a convention, users expect elements to work a certain way when they visit a new website, because that's how things usually work. And then confusion. With these elements, no single design approach dominates. And even the most popular approach is used by, at most, 49% of websites. For such design elements, users don't know what to expect when they visit a new site. This is important because you ideally want to design your website where users strongly expect how the elements of your design will work. If not, to follow a convention that users can roughly expect how the elements of your design will work. The problem is when you design something in such a way that users are not used to, because then you start adding layers of comprehension that the user will be expected to go through to use or understand your website. To give you an example, imagine if I put the navigation menu on my website on the bottom. This immediately looks strange to you, and for good reason. This design decision would definitely be in the minority, causing confusion for users. Because it's a web design standard, meaning that 80% or more websites follow that the navigation is at the top of your website. Some more examples of web design standards 80% more websites follow are a logo in the top left corner of the page, a search box on the home page, an absence of splash pages, breadcrumbs listed horizontally when they are used, and hamburger menus on mobile. Some examples of web design conventions could be changing the color of visited links, placing the shopping cart link in the upper right corner of the page, and placing links to sibling areas in a left-hand column. And some examples of confusion, meaning that at most 49% of websites follow, are scrolling takeovers, preloaders, smooth scrolling, social icons in the header, slideshows on the homepage, and videos on the homepage. And this leads me to the next point. Breaking elements or design decisions of your website into categories of standard, convention, and confusion can be misleading. Because it says here that a video on the homepage would lead to or be defined as confusion, which instinctively doesn't make any sense. And if you really look at what this breakdown implies, it's that your website's design level of standardization is dependent on how popular your website design aligns with everyone else's, which isn't really helpful. Because if I wanted to put that video on my homepage, the video wouldn't negatively impact anyone's user experience. It could only help if the user played the video and got some value out of it, assuming it doesn't autoplay. This is where there needs to be a distinction made between web design standards and web design best practices. Web design standards can lead us to some great best practices, but it definitely isn't the only arbiter of how to design an effective website. Here are some examples of how Orbit Media lists some web design standards and how they align with best practices. So we have 53% of websites have a search tool in the header. This is a commonplace for it, but unnecessary on small or well-organized sites. 55% of websites have a contact button in the top right. Put it here and it will be easy for anyone to find. 54% of websites have a value proposition above the fold, implying that maybe you should have one too. Don't be clever, don't use a tagline, just be specific and descriptive. 42% of websites have a slider or a slideshow. Some sites still do it, despite tons of evidence and research against its ineffectiveness. 18% of websites have a video on the homepage. Uncommon, but effective. Why not upgrade the format for key messages? If you followed web design standards and conventions, then that would mean your website may end up probably having some vague value proposition as your H1, considering not having a call to action in the top right corner, considering using a slider, or not having a great video to convey a key message. And all that would go against best practices despite what the standards are saying. So in the end, web design standards, where 80% of websites followed that design approach, give us the best indication of general rules we should follow with our designs, and generally speaking, not deviate from. And then conventions and anything less common should be determined on a per design basis with the best user experience and best practices in mind. Thank you for watching. If you want to be a better web designer or developer, check out my other videos.